Sir Rupert Charles Hart-Davis was an English publisher, editor and man of letters. He founded the publishing company Rupert Hart-Davis Ltd. As a biographer, he is remembered for his Hugh Walpole; as an editor, for his collected letters of Oscar Wilde; and, as both editor and part author, for the Lyttelton, Hart-Davis Letters. Working at a publishing firm before the Second World War, Hart-Davis began to forge literary relationships that would be important later in his career. Founding his publishing company in 1946, Hart-Davis was praised for the quality of the firm's publications and production, but he refused to cater to public tastes, and the firm eventually lost money. After relinquishing control of the firm, Hart-Davis concentrated on writing and editing, producing collections of letters and other works which brought him the sobriquet, the King of Editors. Biography. Early years. Hart-Davis was born in Kensington, London. He was legally the son of Richard Hart-Davis, a stockbroker, and his wife Sybil Ann Q.T. Cooper. But by the time of his conception the couple were estranged, though still living together, and Sybil Hart-Davis had many lovers at that period. Hart-Davis believed the most likely candidate for his natural father to be a Yorkshire banker called Gervase Beckett. Hart-Davis was educated at Eton and Balliol College, Oxford, though he found university life not to his taste and left after less than a year. Hart-Davis decided to become an actor, and he studied at the Old Vic, where he came to realize that he was not a talented enough actor to succeed, and he turned instead to publishing in 1929, joining William Heinemann Limited as an office boy and assistant to the managing director Charlie Evans. He spent 2 years with Heinemann and a year as manager of the Book Society. During this period, he built up good relationships with a number of authors and was able to negotiate a directorship for himself at Jonathan Cape Limited. In his 7 years with Cape, Hart-Davis recruited a successful group of authors ranging from the poets William Plumer, Cecil Day-Lewis, Edmund Blunden and Robert Frost, to the humorous Beachcomber. He was well placed to secure Duff Cooper's Life of Talleyrand, as Cooper was his uncle. As the junior partner at Cape, he had to handle the difficult authors including Robert Graves, Wyndham Lewis and Arthur Ransome, the last being seen as difficult because of his wife Jennia, with her distrustfulness, venom and guile. Hart-Davis was a close friend of Ransome, sharing an enthusiasm for cricket and rugby. After Cape's death he commented to George Lyttelton that Cape had been one of the tightest-fisted old bastards I've ever encountered. The second partner, Ren Howard, was even tighter than Cape, and neither of them liked fraternizing with authors, which they left to Hart-Davis. In World War II, Hart-Davis volunteered for military service as a private soldier, but was soon commissioned into the Coldstream Guards. He did not see active service, never being stationed more than 25 miles from London. Independent publisher. After the war, Hart-Davis was unable to obtain satisfactory terms from Jonathan Cape to return to the company, and in 1946 he struck out on his own, founding Rupert Hart-Davis Ltd. in partnership with David Garnett and Teddy Young, and with financial backing from Eric Linklater, Arthur Ransome, H.E. Bates, Geoffrey Keynes, and Celia and Peter Fleming. His own literary tastes dictated which books were accepted and which rejected. Frequently he turned down commercial successes because he thought little of the work's literary merit. He later said, "I usually found that the sales of the books I published were in inverse ratio to my opinion of them. That's why I established some sort of reputation without making any money." In 1946 paper was still rationed. The firm used Garnett's ex-serviceman's ration, but as only one ex-serviceman's ration could be used per firm, it could not use that of Hart-Davis. However, the firm was given the allocation at cost of a Glasgow bookseller and occasional pre-war publisher Alan Jackson. The partners decided to start initially with reprints of dead authors, as if a new book became a bestseller the firm would not have paper for a reprint and the author might leave. They made an exception for Stephen Potter's Gamesmanship, which was a short book, collected every ream of paper they could buy and printed 25,000 copies. Likewise 25,000 copies of Eric Linklater's Sealskin Trousers were printed. The firm had bestsellers such as Gamesmanship and Heinrich Harre's 7 Years in Tibet, which sold more than 200,000 copies. Also, in the early years, Hart-Davis secured Ray Bradbury for his firm, recognizing the quality of a science fiction author who also wrote poetry. Other good sellers were Peter Fleming, Eric Linklater and Gerald Durrell, but bestsellers were too few, and though the output of Rupert Hart-Davis Ltd. Was regularly praised for the high quality of its printing and binding, the too was an expense that weighed the company down. A further expense was added when G. M. Young's biography of Stanley Baldwin was published in 1952. Both Winston Churchill and Lord Beaverbrook threatened to sue if certain passages were not removed or amended. With the help of the lawyer Arnold Goodman, an agreement was reached to replace the offending sentences, but the firm had the hideously expensive job of removing and replacing 7 leaves from 7,580 copies. By the mid-50s, Rupert Hart-Davis Ltd. could no longer sustain an independent existence, and in 1956 it was absorbed into the Heinemann Group. Heinemann sold the imprint to the American firm Harcourt Brace in 1961, who sold it to the Granada Group in 1963. When Hart-Davis retired from publishing, though remaining as non-executive chairman until 1968, the Rupert Hart-Davis Ltd. logo was a woodcut of a fox, with a background of oak leaves. The company was based at No. 36 Soho Square, London W1. Reprint series published over the years were the Reynard Library of Great English Writers and the Mariners Library of Nautical Books. Author is Hugh Walpole's literary executor, and being unable to find a potential biographer who would tackle the job to his satisfaction, Hart-Davis proposed to Walpole's publishers, Macmillan, that he should write the biography himself, to which Harold Macmillan replied that he couldn't think of a better person to do it. When Hugh Walpole was published in 1952, it was praised as among the half-dozen best biographies of the century. It has been reissued several times. Hart-Davis wrote no more books until after his retirement from publishing, but between 1955 and 1962, he wrote about 250,000 words to his old schoolmaster George Lyttelton, which, together with Lyttelton's similar contribution, made up the 6 volumes of the Lyttelton Hart-Davis Letters, published between 1978 and 1984 after Lyttelton's death. Although he spent much of his life researching old letters, Hart-Davis destroyed the originals of the letters after his edited versions of them had been printed. He was equally unscholarly about his uncle Duff Cooper's diaries, whose frankness shocked him so much that he wanted to destroy them. In retirement, Hart-Davis wrote 3 volumes of autobiography entitled The Arms of Time, The Power of Chance and Halfway to Heaven. The first, a particularly cherished project, was a memoir of his beloved mother Sybil, who died young, to her son's desolation. Editor Hart-Davis was described by The Times as the king of editors. He edited volumes of the letters of the playwright Oscar Wilde, the writer and caricaturist Max Beerbohm, and the writer George Moore, as well as the diaries of the poet Siegfried Sassoon and the autobiography of Arthur Ransome. A Beggar in Purple, his commonplace book, was published in 1983. Praise from the Past, a collection of tributes to writers, was published in 1996. His complete letters of Oscar Wilde, compiled over the same period as Hart-Davis's correspondence with George Lyttelton, was described in a review of the latter as a mammoth undertaking whose difficulties and challenges are documented in great detail in the letters, giving a satisfying portrayal of what dedication in literary scholarship looks like from the inside. Wilde's grandson, Merlin Holland, wrote, "It was his decision 50 years ago to publish the first edition of Oscar Wilde's letters which helped to put my grandfather back into the position which he lost in 1895 as one of the most charismatic and fascinating figures in English literary history." In his last memoir, Hart-Davis listed the books he had edited as the second omnibus book 1930, then and now 1935, The Essential Neville Cardis 1949, Cricket All His Life by E. V. Lucas 1950, All in Due Time by Humphrey House 1955, George Moore, Letters to Lady Cunard 1895-1933, 1957, The Letters of Oscar Wilde 1962, Max Beerbohm, Letters to Reggie Turner 1964, More Theatres by Max Beerbohm 1969, Last Theatres by Max Beerbohm 1970, A Peep into the Past by Max Beerbohm 1972, A Catalogue of the Caricatures of Max Beerbohm 1972, The Autobiography of Arthur Ransom 1976, Electric Delights by William Plumer 1978, Selected Letters of Oscar Wilde 1979, Two Men of Letters 1979, Siegfried Sassoon, Diaries 1920-1922, 3 vols, 1981-85, War Poems of Siegfried Sassoon 1983, More Letters of Oscar Wilde 1985, Siegfried Sassoon, Letters to Max Beerbohm 1986, Letters of Max Beerbohm 1986. Ancestry and Personal Life. Hart-Davis was a great-great-great-grandson of William IV. William had several illegitimate children with his mistress Mrs. Jordan. The youngest daughter, Lady Elizabeth Fitzclarence, later Countess of Errol, had daughters including Lady Agnes Hay. Lady Agnes married James Duff, 5th Earl Fife, and among the children was Lady Agnes Duff, who married Sir Alfred Cooper. The children included Sybil Cooper, mother of Rupert Hart-Davis. While still an actor, Hart-Davis met the young Peggy Ashcroft, whom he married in 1929. The marriage was short-lived, ending in divorce in 1933, though the two remained warm friends until Ashcroft's death more than 60 years later. In November 1933, he married Catherine Comfortborden Turner, with whom he had a daughter, Bridget, in 1935, and 2 sons, Duff in 1936, and Adam in 1943. The second marriage became dysfunctional, although husband and wife remained on good terms and stayed together until their children were grown up, when Hart-Davis and Comfort divorced. In 1964 he married Ruth Simon, an EQT Ware, with whom he had had a long-term relationship. After her death in 1967 he married June Williams in 1968, who outlived him. After the war, until his retirement, Hart-Davis lived during the week in a flat above his publishing business in Soho Square, returning to his main home at Bromsden Farm, Oxfordshire at weekends. He retired to Marskey in North Yorkshire, where he died at the age of 92. Public service and honours. From 1957 to 1969, Hart-Davis was chairman of the London Library. During this period, a financial crisis arose when Westminster City Council decided that the library should no longer qualify for charitable exemption from a local property tax. Hart-Davis organized fundraising on a grand scale, including an auction, with the M. Forster offering the manuscript of A Passage to India, and T.S. Eliot a duplicate manuscript of The Waste Land. Hart-Davis was also secretary of the Literary Society and a member of A.P. Herbert's Committee on Censorship. Public honors included honorary doctorates from the universities of Durham and Reading and a knighthood in 1967 for services to literature. 22 books were dedicated to him between 1936 and 1998, including works by H. E. Bates, Edmund Blunden, C. Day-Lewis, Ray Bradbury, Lady Diana Cooper, Eric Linklater, Compton Mackenzie, Anthony Powell, and Leon L. Merlin Holland's Oscar Wilde. A Life in Letters was dedicated to the memory of Rupert Hart-Davis, with love and gratitude.